welcome back. Before the break, we were talking fraud and why we haven't seen a lot of it investigated and prosecuted for crimes leading up to the financial crisis and in the wake of it. Now, before the break, we talked auditors and we also talked about jail time. Now let's talk about regulators. First, is this idea that you are safe as an investor or as a person putting your money in the bank because it is a regulated firm? Let's hear what James Catoulis of the Commodity Customer Coalition says about that.
Yeah, in a sense, the regulators are almost a smoke and mirror facade, much like some of these Ponzi schemes that they fail to catch. I mean, people feel safe when they're in invested in a regulated entity, but a lot of times I think that's a false sense of security. I mean, these regulators clearly have proven that they can't catch these frauds, and I think people do less due diligence on these regulated entities.
So now I really want to get the opinion of Sam Antar, because he is a convicted felon himself, former CFO for Crazy Eddie, a massive fraud of the 1980s. So let's bring you back in here, Mr. Antar. I'm curious what the heck you think is going on with regulation, because you said that accountants need to be smarter. But I mean, one argument you can make for regulators is if they were so smart, they would be on Wall Street where they could make a lot more money. So, I mean, is that one of the issues with regulators?
Whereas accounting gives us a false sense of security by calling the work that they do audits, the same thing happens with regulators. The regulators are undermanned and under-resourced. Take the Securities and Exchange Commission, for instance. There are only 4,000 people, including maintenance workers, at the Securities and Exchange Commission. There are 35 to 38,000 cops in New York. And white-collar crime and financial regulation requires a large, enormous amount of resources and is much, much tougher to investigate than regular, what we would call blue-collar crime, crimes of violence. The regulators just simply don't have the manpower to effectively police the capital markets of the United States. So therefore, the gentleman that's spoken earlier is correct. There is a false sense of security that's given to the investors by the fact that there are regulators present, and there's also that there's auditors present.
Okay, so let's, we have regulators and auditors. I guess where I'm most concerned is in these situations where you have customers that have their money in segregated funds where it's getting tapped into, where that's never supposed to happen, or where you have too big to fail firms that would need bailouts if they did enough wrongdoing to where they were going to go under the weight of massive fraud. So I guess my biggest concern is, how do you think we get to where there aren't frauds in these areas where you just are never supposed to have customers at risk, or depositors or taxpayers?
Well, part of the problem is, prosecuting these people for frauds is that these criminal cases are very hard to develop. We have a system of justice that's based upon the presumption of innocence, and most of these cases are built upon circumstantial evidence that doesn't pass muster in the criminal court. So most of these people are not concerned about ever going to prison, or ever, even if there was an investigation, they're ever actually being criminal charges. As far as, again, going back to the regulators, they just don't have the manpower to effectively police the firms that they're looking at. It's just not, doesn't exist. Okay,
so what about personal responsibility? One thing that we've talked about on this show before is clawbacks, where your capital is on the line if you screw up and your firm is going to go under. Would that be a deterrent? Would you have done what you did if you knew? Okay.
But the SEC has brought in very, very small amount of clawback cases. Right now, most of the time, it's the firms the deep-pocketed firms indemnifying the individuals and paying for their mistakes, or the insurance companies indemnifying the firms and paying for the firm's mistakes. We have what's called the socialization of bad behavior.
Right.
Bad behavior has become socialized. The consequences of bad behavior has become socialized, that the individual doesn't have responsibility for their bad behavior.
So it sounds like so far the only thing we've talked about that's actually a realistic solution is something like clawbacks, which would instill personal responsibility for bad behavior where it would really hurt, right?
Personal liability. You lose your house.
Okay.
You lose your car.
Okay, so we've hit on something finally. So there's something that we can say it would be a plan going forward. I'm curious, looking back, Obviously, a lot has changed with the regulatory system and with laws in the wake of Crazy Eddie, because after Enron, we had Sarbanes-Oxley, which was a massive overhaul. Some of that has been undone by the Jobs Act. Some of that I'm not convinced regulators even want to use, or prosecutors even want to use, because there could be a lot of accounting fraud that, from what I understand, could have been prosecuted under Sarbanes-Oxley, which has not. So my question to you, how close are we to a situation where a Crazy Eddie could occur again?
It's occurring right now. It's occurring all over the place. Firms with impunity manipulate numbers, and the SEC does nothing except, oh, we caught you, fix your numbers, and walk away. Can I give you an example of one company?
Please do.
Groupon.
Oh, wow. All right, let's hear it.
Groupon. Groupon was reporting revenues that was in violation of generally accepted accounting principles. Its auditing firm, I believe, was Ernst & Young, a Big Four accounting firm. And they said that it was in compliance, but it wasn't. Two accounting professors, Ed Ketz from Penn State University and Anthony Cantonich from Villanova University, read the documents, the public documents. They don't have access to the books and records. They don't have access to management. They don't have access to the company premises. They just read the company's books and records, and they find that Groupon was overstating its revenues, was violating accounting rules on revenues, and they bring their information to the SEC, and the SEC goes, okay, fine, Groupon, go fix it. This is a Big Four accounting firm. What's going on here? Now, going back to my day, in my day, I had to fool auditors. I had to lie to auditors in order to defraud my investors. Today, you don't have to lie to auditors. You don't have to fool them. In many ways, they're complicit with management. They're in bed with management. They have this incestuous relationship with management that makes crime easy.
Wow.
And that's just one example with Groupon. I can give you dozens of examples.
So you're saying it's actually easier to commit the kind of fraud that you committed now than it was in the 80s?
In my day, I knew auditors were stupid. I knew auditors were incompetent. But I always thought that if they saw something wrong, they would do the right thing. Today, you don't have to worry about them seeing something wrong, because they're still going to do the wrong thing. They've gone from being enablers. They've gone to being people that are duped to actually co-conspirators in many cases.
Wow.
Co-conspirators to financial statement manipulation.
Wow.
And it's a shame, and it's going on more and more often.
Sam Mantar, I really appreciate you coming on this show and bringing us that perspective. Former white-collar criminal, former criminal CFO of Crazy Eddie's. Thanks so much.